The Witch in the Wood by T.H. White, Chapter 18. In Bedegraine, it was the night before the battle. A large number of bishops were blessing the armies on both sides, hearing confessions and saying Mass. Arthur's men were reverent about this, but of course King Lot's men were not, for this was the proper tradition in all armies that were going to be defeated since the days of King Henry V. The bishops assured both sides that they were going to win because God was with them, but Arthur's men knew they were outnumbered by about 3-1, so they thought it best to get shriven. King Lot's men, who were also aware of the odds, spent the night dancing, drinking, dicing, and telling each other nasty stories. This is how the history goes, at any rate. In the King of England's tent, the last staff talk had been held, and Merlin had stayed behind to have a chat with the king. He looked worried. "What are you worried about, Merlin? Are we going to lose this battle after all?"
No, you'll win the battle all right. There's no harm in telling you so. You'll do your best and fight hard and call in you-know-whom just at the right moment. It will be in your nature to win the battle, so it doesn't matter telling you. No, it's something else which I ought to have told you that is worrying me just now.
What was it about?
Good gracious heavens, boy. Why should I be worrying about it if I could remember what it was?
Was it about the maiden called Nimue?
No. That's all quite a different business. It was something I can't remember.
But after a bit, Merlin took his beard out of his mouth and began counting on his fingers.
I've told you about Guinevere, haven't I?
I don't believe so.
No matter. I've warned you about her and Lancelot.
That warning, said the king, would be a base one anyway, whether it was true or false.
Then I've said the bit about Excalibur and how you must be careful of the sheath.
Yes.
I've told you all about your father, so it can't be him, and I've given you a hint about the person. What's confounding me, and I've given you a hint about the Perron. What's confounding me, exclaimed the magician, pulling out his hair in tufts, is that I can't remember whether it's in the future or past.
Never mind about it, said Arthur. I don't like knowing the future anyway. I'd much rather you didn't worry about it, because it only worries me.
But it's something I must say. It's vital.
Stop thinking about it, suggested the king, and then perhaps it will come back. You ought to take a holiday anyway. You've been bothering your head too much lately. What with all these warnings and arrangings about the battle.
I will take a holiday, exclaimed Merlin. As soon as this battle is over, I'll go on a walking tour into Northumberland. I have a master called Belaise, who lives in Northumberland, and perhaps he will be able to tell me what it is I am trying to remember. Then we could have some wild fowling together. He is a great man for geese.
Good, said Arthur. You take a long holiday, and then when you come back, we can think of something to prevent Nimue.
The old man stopped fiddling with his fingers and looked sharply at the king. You're an innocent fellow, Arthur, he said. Thank God.
Why?
Do you remember anything about the magic you had when you were small?
No, did I have some magic? I can remember that I was interested in birds and things. Indeed, that's why I still keep my menagerie at Caerleon. But I don't remember about any magic.
People don't remember, said Merlin, after they are grown up. I suppose you wouldn't remember about the parables I used to tell you when I was trying to explain things?
Of course I remember. There was one about some rabbi or other which you told me when I wanted to take Kay somewhere. I never could understand why the cow died.
Well, I want to tell you another parable now.
I shall love it, said Arthur.
In the east, perhaps in the same place that Rabbi Yochanan came from, there was a certain man who was walking in the market of Damascus when he came face to face with death. He noticed an expression of surprise upon the spectre's horrid countenance, but they passed by one another without speaking. The man was frightened and went on to a wise man to ask what should be done. The wise man told him that death had probably come to Damascus to fetch him away next morning. The poor fellow was terrified at this, and asked however he could escape. The only way they could think of between them was that the victim should ride all night to Aleppo, thus eluding the skull and bloody bones. So this man did ride to Aleppo. It was a terrible ride, which had never been done in one night before, and when he was there, he walked into the marketplace, congratulating himself on having eluded death. Just then, Death came up to him and tapped him on the shoulder. "Excuse me," he said, "but I have come for you." "Why?" Why, exclaimed the terrified man, I thought I met you in Damascus yesterday. Exactly, said Death. That is why I looked so surprised. If I had been told to meet you today in Aleppo. Arthur reflected on this grim, gruesome old chestnut for some time, then said, So it was no good trying to escape Nimue? So it is no good trying to escape Nimue? Even if I wanted to, said Merlin, it would be no good. There is a thing about time which the philosopher Einstein is going to find out. Some people call it destiny. But what I can't get over is this toad-in-the-hole business. Ah, well, said Merlin, people will do a lot for love. And then the toad isn't necessarily unhappy in its hole. Not more than when you are asleep, you know. I shall just hibernate until they let me out again.
So they will let you out again?
I'll tell you something, Arthur, which may be a surprise to you. Of course, it won't happen for hundreds of years, but actually both of us ought to come back. Do you know what is going to be written on your tombstone? Hic hocet Arturus Rex, quondam Rex quo futurus. Do you remember your Latin?
And I am to come back as well?
Some say from the Vale of Avalon.
The king thought about it in silence. It was full night outside, and there was stillness in the bright pavilion. The sentries moving on the grass could not be heard. I wonder, he said at last, whether they will remember about my table. Merlin did not answer. His head was bowed on the white beard, and his hands were clasped between his knees. What sort of people will they cry? What sort of people will they be, Merlin? Cried the young voice in anguish. And that is the end of chapter 18.